This is Baruch here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and what you have here is the Breslov Research version of the Likutei Maharan. Basically, it's a terrific English pirush, explanation of what's going on in the Likutei Maharan. So we come over here and remember this story that we learned, in the last year. So this is the meaning of what the sages said. It is comparable to someone who was walking along a path in the utter darkness of night. Let me bring this down a little bit closer. I think we can see it. We'll make it work out. He was afraid of the thorns and the ditches. It was dark, wild beasts and bandits, not knowing which path he was on. When he happened upon a lit torch, he saw some light. He was saved from the thorns and the ditches, but he was still afraid of wild beasts and bandits, not knowing which path he was on. When dawn broke, he was saved from wild beasts and bandits, because the light was around all along, he could see everything, yet still did not know which path he was on. When he came to a crossroads, he was saved from all of them. What is this crossroads? So this is very interesting, very mysterious. Rebbe said it's the Talmud Chacham and the day of death. So it's hard to understand exactly what this means if you just said it, and then Rebbe Nachman went through a long explanation of what they're talking about, many, many different kinds of ideas, going down to basic Kabbalistic ideas. But what he wants to talk about here is he wants to talk about the concept of confessing before a true tzaddik. And what I said that when we first started learning this was Rebbe Nachman died roughly over 200 years ago. So when he was talking about confessing before a tzaddik, and they told some stories at the beginning about people who did and people who did not confess before the tzaddik, you have to wonder, which tzaddik is he talking about? Of course, there's a lot of tzaddikim around. There could be potentially a lot of tzaddikim, but what is it that Rabbi Nachman is talking about? Because obviously, he's not here personally, physically. It's not only that, but in his humility, there are no pictures of Rabbi Nachman. Nobody knows if he wore a shtreimel, if he didn't. Maybe some people say he did. Nobody really knows exactly what he looked like. There are no pictures, no paintings, nothing. He died at 38 years old. And this was like in 1810. So that's what we know about the background. So we have this story is that when the person gets to the crossroads, he says, which is that refers to a Talmud Chacham, and the day of death he's saved from everything. So let's come back over here, and this applies to number 9. He says, this applies each time you come to a Torah scholar. You should tell him all the conundrums in your heart. The Talmud Chacham is an aspect of Moshe, who is an aspect of Ayin, which means nothing. As is written, wisdom comes from Ayin, and in this way you become encompassed in the Ein Sof, the Holy One, blessed be He. Now let's go backwards just a little bit and come over here, and we're going to get a little explanation of all of these different parts of that story. Let me bring it down a little bit more again. He says, when he got to the crossroad, let's go even to open number 106. He says, a path may seem right. So Rashi explains that this is a person who, because he thinks he's on the right path, will mislead himself to the bitter end. In our context, this is the person who has eliminated the vices that stem from the 4 Yesodot, which we mentioned before, but who has yet to confess in the presence of a Talmud Chacham. The negative structures and letter combinations formed by the sins he committed before coming to the tzaddik remain. And as a result, he might think he is on the proper path when in fact he is not. In other words, that there's been some what would you say? So move it up. What's the right word? Taking out of some of the bitterness of the deeds that a person has done that he said previously were etched on the person's bones, meaning atzmos means in his own essence. Having not yet confessed because he's missing confession, he has yet to have the tzaddik direct him on the proper path. Now, saved from all of them. So when he got to the crossroads, he was saved. The parable thus translates in our text as follows. Someone who was walking along a path in the utter darkness of night. A person was walking through this world, that is us, seeking rectification for his evil deeds. People want to repent. People want to come back to their source. Everybody does, even the worst of us. He was afraid of the thorns and the ditches, of wild beasts and bandits, and he did not know which path he was on. He was subject to the vices that stem from the four elements and the four humors, and did not know how to conduct himself because the person basically had been sucked into the klipos, and as a result of that, he could see himself in a certain way trying to go forward, in other words, trying to reach for the light, but nonetheless, this is part of him. When he happened upon a lit torch, when he saw the tzaddik, he was saved from the thorns and the ditches. He was saved from the vices that stem from the vegetable and mineral life forms, namely melancholy and even evil passions. Now, we went through these ideas previously. So he said, but he was still afraid of wild beasts and bandits and did not know which path he was on, yet there were other vices he hadn't eliminated. Now, in other words, he was going the right way, but he was not real pure. In other words, when they say that it's carved in his bone, it's a metaphor to say that it goes to the very essence of a person, because the atzmos of a person is the person himself. Now, in Hebrew, they pronounce it ivrit, they pronounce it atzamot. It means it's a person's bones, actually the bones, because the bones are the basic structure of who you are. And there's marrow inside of those bones, and that becomes the essence of the person. But he was still afraid of wild beasts and bandits and did not know which path he was on, yet there were other vices he hadn't eliminated. When dawn broke, after seeing the tzaddik, he gave him charity. Remember, that was part of it, is giving money to the Talmud Chacham. He was saved from wild beasts and bandits then. This eliminated the vices that stem from the animal and human life forms, namely idle chatter and pride. But he still did not know which path he was on. Although he had rid himself of all the major vices and their derivatives, his previous misdeeds still had the power to mislead him as above. So here we are, kind of a mixture, even for those of us who do tshuva, but we always have this part of our lives. So he said, but he still did not know which path he's on, although he had rid himself of all that. So we're down here. When he came to a crossroads, when he confessed in front of a Torah scholar, he was saved from all of them. The tzaddik was able to reveal the proper devotional path for him to follow. Now let's read this little part here. He's going to go to a review and give us a nice little shtickle Torah here. In review, when a person perceives that whatever happens to him is for his benefit, remember that idea? This person has a foretaste of the world to come. Many things happen to us that we don't like. Those are gevuros, those are dinim, rules and judgments. Attaining this perception, though, of realizing that these things are also good. Whosoever Rabbi Maharan said to me, who said that dinim are bad? Some dinim are. But dinim are not necessarily bad. Attaining this perception is only possible when he frees Malchus of a holiness from the control of the nations and returns it to God, and realizing that the things that are happening to your life really don't stem from the guy in the other car, or the people down the street, or the business. It really all comes from one place, and that's the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, that's Hashem. This is accomplished by confession of one's sins in the presence of a Torah scholar, which unites the holy names Yud Kei Vav Kei and the name Elokim, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei stands for mercy and also stands for the Kabbalistic concept of Zeir Anpin. And Elokim refers to usually Malchus or Bina, but the female aspect, and it refers to Din. Knowing that all is for the best, the awareness that one's suffering also stems from God's love. In other words, the ultimate is nothing but radiance of goodnesses coming from the Ein Sof Baruch Hu to us. But that doesn't mean it's not perverted along the way. The different places steal it. That God's love is constant. And that even when we perceive what's going on in our lives, and we suffer, because we do, it's still love, the love of God. It's difficult for us to understand. So that person who's able to do this is considered complete. He has complete das. A person's sins blemish his malchus and becomes etched upon his bones. And that's what we said before. They go to malchus, means our essence, back to the essence again. And it also comes to the concept that this is the utter essence of a bone. The way to rectify malchus is by confessing one's sins in front of the tzaddik, that is the Torah scholar. The bones are thus healed. Confession in front of a Torah scholar corresponds to returning malchus to its source. Now, I saw a very, very beautiful, I guess you would say that it was a drawing or a print of what it looks like when malchus returns to Bina, the ultimate aliyah to our source. And it's basically a hay surrounded by darkness. Half of the picture is that hay, and the other half on the other side is the hay swallowed by whiteness. This is the aliyah of malchus to Bina, malchus to its source. This is because the source of malchus is fire, Torah, and Torah scholars embody the essence of the Torah itself. The tzaddik's presence is therefore vital, so therefore you need to be able to confess before the tzaddik. Now here's, once again, it's the problem. This is that, how do I understand it? This is Rabbeinu HaKodesh, Rebbe Nachman, is not alive. So you can go to his kever, that is before the war in Ukraine, which is going on right now. And the tzaddik can effect forgiveness after hearing the confession because, by virtue of his deep humility, the tzaddik can elevate the rectified malchus to its ultimate source. In other words, it's the concept of bringing malchus to Bina, that's what they call it, is the ultimate ability to take that which is low, that is which is exposed to foreign, unclean sources, can be risen up, can rise up, all the way to its source, which is spiritual and not physical. So he says, confessing in the presence of a tzaddik is actually the third of a three-step process for achieving repentance. The first two steps are attaching oneself to the tzaddik, and then giving charity to the tzaddik. But then the final one is that then the tzaddik can direct him in line with his soul's root, so that he can enter the realm of holiness. So let's go over here now, and let's see, go back to where we started. So he says, this applies each time you come to a Torah scholar. You should tell him all the conundrums in your heart. Now, what he means by conundrums, let's see, this applies each time. So conundrum means all the things that are in your heart. In other words, but when you go to daven in the Shemona Esrei, I think, there's always different kinds of thoughts going through your mind that really are not on the Pirush HaMilim. It's really not exactly the words that you're looking at. You're really getting ideas coming from all different places. But I believe that those ideas that are coming from out are really the things that you need to be praying about. And what we need to be able to do is, if you're worried about, now I'm an older person, I have grandchildren, so I'm worried about my grandchildren, let's say. People could be worried about their parnasa. You have to put all of this into the prayer. It's just to realize that the thoughts that are extraneous, that you really don't want, that are interfering, are actually could be worked into the prayer. The Talmud Chacham is an aspect of Moshe, who is an aspect of Ayin, and as is written, wisdom comes from Ayin, and in this way you become encompassed in the Ein Sof by nullifying yourself. We have to see what that's talking about in the next year. This is Baruch Fleischman.